Boldwood presents Tide of Waves and Secrets, written by C.L. Mecca and read by Kate Handford and Max Dowler. Chapter 1. Rowan. Heirs Elydor. I stood with my hand on the door, unable to open it. When I'd left, my grandfather had been reasonably well, but the second I returned home, it was apparent something was amiss. The hall of our manor house wasn't bustling with activity. Instead, I'd been greeted by our steward as if someone had died. I pushed the door open. Knowing my grandfather would not live forever and being confronted with the evidence of that fact were two very different things. Propped up by pillows, he sat alone. "You look like shite," I said, striding toward him and leaning down to kiss the wrinkled, white-haired man on his forehead. Sitting on the side of the canopied bed, I wasn't surprised when he reached for my hand.
"Talk to me when you're dying," he said with a weak smile. "It is a messy business, death. With luck, you will find a way to delay your own. But I fear my time has come."
I wanted to argue with him. Tell Sir Thomas Durnell, my grandfather and mentor, he simply could not die. I'd thought he was invincible. The fade? His frail fingers squeezed my own.
"I'd always imagined it to happen much more slowly," he said.
"Would you rather it this way?"
"Now that you're home, I would."
I suspected as much. "I wish I could stay." My grandfather sighed heavily.
"I already know that you cannot."
All humans in Elydor, but especially my family, had some sort of intuitive abilities. But as the Keeper, my grandfather had more than most. Only those with Durnell blood, or Harrow blood to be precise, though that name hadn't been used in centuries, knew of it. "What did you see?"
"The lost princess has indeed returned. You intercepted her and spent some time in Athralis. You are on a mission, heading to Thalassaria, are you not?"
As always, my grandfather was entirely accurate.
"This mission of yours will not go as planned. I see nothing else yet, but worry for your safety, Rowan."
That was not information to take lightly. My grandfather had mentored me since I could wield a sword. He knew I was capable and very rarely worried for me. Or at least, enough to admit as much. "That isn't like you?"
"No," he said. "It is not."
I waited, but he didn't seem inclined to elaborate. If he were anyone else, anyone but the Keeper, I could use my own intuitive skills to sense his emotion, to learn more. But he had long ago learned how to shield out others from gaining information from him, an essential skill for someone who held all of the secrets of our family's history. He blinked, as if attempting to focus on me. All Keepers, every person with the same blood running through them, had been trained for this. For my grandfather's death. Some with more trepidation than others, but all knew the signs. "Your eyesight?" I asked. He nodded.
"I can see you, but not as well as when you left. Tell me everything."
I started from the beginning. I met Princess Mevlida, Mev, on the road, fleeing north. As you foretold, she'd been taken by Prince Kael of Gioria, but in an interesting twist of fate, The two had already formed a bond, and later, a formal union, I said. Kael has sworn his allegiance to King Galfried.
Ah,
Grandfather sighed.
so that is why I could see a rift between the Giaorian king and one of his sons. If either of them were to fall in love with an Aetherian woman, I'd have expected it to be Kael and not Terran.
I'd not have expected any Giaorian, least of all one of King Balthor's sons, to fall in love with the daughter of their enemy. But I suppose that's why you're the keeper, and I'm just a spy. My grandfather made a sound of disbelief.
You are not just anything, Rowan, and know it well. If I'd ever met a more kind, loyal, resourceful—
Dying, I teased, knowing my grandfather did not like mincing words or being anything other than forthright, has not diminished your overhyping capabilities.
Overhyping? A new word for me, he said, the meaning of which I can easily discern. The princess must have quite a vocabulary, among other attributes from the modern world. Tell me of her.
And so I did. Anything not to think about the fact that my grandfather's eyesight was leaving him, one of the final stages of the fading. I recalled my adventures with Mev, Kael, and Lyra, telling him what I'd learned of the modern world in the human realm from Mev. I recounted how difficult it had been to gain Kael's trust, and how, after confronting his own brother to protect Mev, Kael had eventually pledged his loyalty to her and King Galfried. I also told my grandfather what the king had revealed to the others about reopening the gate, that the most powerful artifacts in each clan needed to be recovered and used in a spell known only to two men, the Aetherian king who opened it and the Giaorian one who closed it. This is as close as we've been since it was closed to seeing the gate reopened once again.
I agree.
With my grandfather's frail hand still holding my own, I acknowledged the pang inside my chest at such a sight. No man in Estimere was more fierce or determined than him. His family had long argued the merits of how the new keeper was chosen. Some said that when the current keeper died, their magic was transferred to the most loyal of those living with Harrow blood coursing through their veins. Others believed it to be someone who excelled at keeping secrets, an essential quality for the keeper. But I knew the truth of it. Having observed and trained with my grandfather since an early age, I was convinced the new keeper was the man, or woman, who possessed all of it. Loyalty, strength, integrity, wisdom, resilience. My grandfather possessed all of these things. There was not a better man alive.
Do not look so sad, grandson. I've lived a full life, and will be glad to reunite with your grandmother. It's been an honor to serve our family and our people. But it's a duty I gladly pass along to another.
He had served our family well, but I also knew how much my grandfather wished to reopen the gate. He'd been alive when it closed, when so many who had come through, never intending to remain in Elydor, were cut off from their families. King Balthor had not just punished his enemy, the Aetherians, but the humans, and, to my mind, all of Elydor. It had been stronger, according to my grandfather, when the free pass of information and knowledge had been allowed between Elydor and the human realm. We will reopen it. It was not a vow I made lightly. Many resourceful people, including my grandfather, had attempted it for many years, and failed. Somehow, I said, Mev was able to pass through the gate despite it being closed. I believe it is a sign. Her Aetherian powers are strong, and her union with Prince Kael fortuitous. Together we will see it done. I make that vow to you, grandfather. The man that had trained me, loved me, smiled.
I have no doubt that you will.
Sighing, as if our conversation had weakened him, he added,
Tread carefully in Thalassaria. You have not spent as much time there as in the other clans. They are neither as welcoming to humans as Aetherians, nor as hostile to us as Giorians. But their neutrality toward us has been just as detrimental. Thalassarians care about their freedom above all. Remember that. There is power in unity and hope, and a peaceful future between all of Elydor's clans is possible, but only if the gate is reopened.
I will retrieve the Tidal Pearl from Thalassaria's queen. We will reopen it. I vowed once again. I will make you proud, grandfather. Smiling, he let go of my hand, patted it, and closed his eyes, obviously tired.
You already have, Rowan. You already have.
Chapter 2. Nerys. Marysthera, capital of Thalassaria. I should return to the palace. The woman who'd been like a mother to me, already old when my parents died, and that had been many years ago, waved a hand as if unconcerned. Look around you. The square is just coming to life. It was true. We sat on the edge of a stone fountain, one of many in the capital. Though not far from the sea, as with most towns in Thalassaria, water could be found everywhere in Marysthera. Fountains, canals, it was our life force. Perhaps, but I have a new ward coming. A human. Aneri waved to a man that I was pretty certain she was with, romantically speaking. For some reason, Aneri denied it. Neither were partnered, so her secrecy made little sense. A human. Aneri's expression didn't change. Some might wrinkle their nose or frown with distaste, but not Aneri. And I had been taught better than that. Still, it was unusual. He's passed through the border. I nodded. Thalassaria was the only kingdom, or clan, as we called them, which did not have open borders. Even Giorians, who despised humans, allowed them to pass freely onto their land. Of course, the humans weren't guaranteed to survive long, but they could enter freely. And will be arriving shortly, I confirmed, watching as two of the few Thalassari children played in the fountain, attempting to redirect the water. Their efforts made me laugh when one accidentally accomplished the feat directly into his friend's face. Hopefully he won't be staying long. This way, Aneri said to the girl. Her legendary patience on display, she showed the girl how to control the stream of water. It brought me back to when I was her age, more than 100 years ago, being taught the very same lesson by my mother's dear friend. It took a few tries, but the girl managed to control the stream a bit better. Why is he here? Aneri asked me. Unsure. Will he stay for the festival? Also unsure. I only know word arrived this morning he was coming, and that he was assigned to me. From the moment he stepped foot onto palace grounds, the human would either be locked inside his bedchamber or escorted by me. It was an unusual custom, But a Thalassari king was once murdered in his very palace, and the queen took no chances when it came to her safety. First, the lost princess returned. Now a human coming to the palace. Those two cannot be coincidental. I agreed. Either way, I'm glad for it. Despite that my other duties as a stormcaller would be suspended, and I had no wish to escort a man to and fro for an extended period, any opportunity to strengthen relations with the human clan was a welcome one. At least, to me. Unfortunately, there were some in Thalassaria, including the Queen, who did not agree. Without warning, the sound of water being lifted had me up and spinning around toward the children. One of them had manipulated a large portion of the fountain's water into the air, enough that, were it to land back where it came from, all four of us would become soaked. I lifted my hand and, with a flick, created a bowl of water to capture its companion. Gently lowering it, I placed both back into the fountain. The children stared at me. "How do you do that?" the boy asked. "I've never seen that before. Can you teach us to do it?" the girl pleaded. I did not wish to tell them it would be many years before either could master such a skill. There are very few in Thalassaria who can contain water within itself, Nerys said gently. The girl's eyes widened. "You are a stormcaller?" "I am." "She's not just any stormcaller," Nerys began. I shook my head. And so it went, as usual. Nerys would tell anyone who might listen how powerful I'd become. Not for the first time, I reconsidered my decision to filter some of the Queen's jealousy toward me, not wanting to upset Nerys. "With practice," I interrupted, "you might become stormcallers too. Keep at it," I said with a smile, "and treat this water with special care. You know what it is?" I asked. "I do," the girl said. "My mama says they are the sacred waters of Maristera." "You are correct," I said. "Many years ago, we'd not have been allowed to manipulate them for play. But that thinking has changed, and you may do so. If you remember, they are special." The girl seemed to understand. It was the same speech my father had once given me, and then, later, learning of the sacred waters myself, I understood how special. "I must go," I said to Nerys, "and will be more often at the palace until the human is gone." "You best be getting rid of him before the festival, then," she said. "I look forward to spending those days with you, even if you refused to challenge. I look forward to it as well," I said, stopping what would be a futile new line of conversation. I kissed Nerys on the head. "I will see you soon." "Enjoy yourself," I said, with a conspiratorial wink. "I have no notion what you're talking about." Since Nerys' male friend had not stopped looking our way this entire time, I was pretty sure that was a blatant lie. But I had to get back, so I let it go. "Keep practicing," I called to the young ones, walking across the square toward the white marble palace, which could be seen easily from here. Most of Thalassaria was flat until you approached the borders, but the palace was built on a hill for fortification. Wondering who the human was and what he wanted from the palace, I hurried my steps, growing more and more curious with each one. It wasn't every day a human visited us. It was promising to be an interesting day ahead.
Chapter 3. Rowan. I'd been to Thalassaria before, but never the palace. This time, when I crossed the border, immediately being stopped by the Stormcaller guards, Instead of registering myself and passing through, I was forced to wait. Though I'd seen Marisol before, the teal and silver shimmering fish with teeth that could be fatal to humans, it was the first time I'd witnessed one being used. Watching as the guard leaned into the canal to place a delicate, waterproof scroll in a Marisol's teeth, a bioluminescent line along its spine began to gently pulse as it swam away. The first time I'd come to Thalassaria, standing along a canal with my father watching those fish messengers swim, I told him I wanted to live here. I understood, however, by the end of that mission, that a human may be welcomed to Thalassaria as a visitor, but to its fiercely independent people, I was an outsider. My place was in Estmir, in the human kingdom.
"You are welcome to pass,"
the guard said, interrupting my thoughts. In a remarkably short time, the message had been sent and received by the palace. Queen Lyrael would see me.
"You know the way?"
Mounting Ember, the warhorse that had been bred over hundreds of years from Elydor's native horse stock, I made my way through the dense coastal fog that clung to the Thalassarian shores. The steady rhythm of Ember's hooves was a constant companion as we navigated the rocky path that wound along the cliffs. Below, the waves crashed against jagged rocks, their spray catching the early morning light. The air smelled of salt and seaweed, the distant call of seabirds, reminding me I was a long way from Estmir. As I arrived in Maristhera, passing through the hustling Serenium Square and heading toward the palace, I focused on my mission in favor of my surroundings. Having long ago shed my cloak, the perpetual warm climate of Elydor's southernmost clan, the reason they favored nearly sheer fabrics, had me also stopping to remove the heavy tunic that I should have left in Estmir. It had been many years since I travelled this far south, and I'd not been thinking of its weather when I set off from home. I had been thinking of my grandfather. But now, I needed to concentrate on what I would say to the Queen when granted an audience, and rehearsed my speech again. King Galfred's daughter has returned, though we are not certain how she slipped through the closed Aetherian gate. With her return, the king is determined, more than ever, to reopen it. As you know, we need the Tidal Pearl in order to do so. She would refuse. I was as certain of that fact as my own name. It was Thalassaria's most precious relic. That she'd allowed King Galfred to use it once, when he opened the gate more than 500 years ago, was a surprise to all who knew of that fact, of which there were precious few. She would refuse, but it was my job to convince her that it would benefit her people to do otherwise. Queen Lyrael may not despise humans, but neither would she lend the Tidal Pearl to Galfred for their benefit. But for her own people, she would do anything. If I wasn't trained as a spy, I may not have noticed the Thalassarian guards hidden behind the trees. Because it was my duty to see what typically went undetected, I easily spotted the camouflaged warriors. By the time I arrived at the palace gates, I'd passed at least 10 of them on both sides of me. No other Elydorian leader was as well protected as the Queen of Thalassaria, whose reputation for paranoia was well known.
"Hold!"
Finally, one who made himself seen, or themselves to be more precise, well ahead of the gatehouse, 4 of the Queen's guards stepped directly into the sand and shell-ridden path on which I'd been travelling. "Identify yourself." The guard knew well my name already. Tempted to tell him as much, I reminded myself that glibness was not my friend in this situation. "Sir Rowan of Estmir," I said. "Your guide has not yet arrived. Dismount." Again, I held my tongue. Reminding the guard that a polite command was just as easily given as a rude one would serve little. By the time my belongings and I were searched, I'd expected my guide to have arrived. Since none of the guards deemed it necessary to update me at any point, I waited without communication of any kind until a rider finally appeared in the distance. I could see it was a woman, but little else. By the time she fully came into view, I was well and truly enamored. Wearing a teal tunic which hung off one shoulder, black, glistening, form-fitting breeches, and a wide belt which appeared from her like scales of a beautiful multicolored fish, the woman epitomized a Thalassarian. With one exception. None could match her beauty. My guide's hair, a shade between brown and blonde, was tied back loosely, with strands escaping everywhere. With full lips and sun-kissed cheeks, her pale green eyes shone with curiosity as she reached me. If I hadn't met the Queen before, I would have assumed this woman was the Queen, except for the obvious fact that the Queen would not be unescorted. But otherwise, her bearing, the way she assessed me, clearly she was of noble birth. Stopping first to speak with one of the guards, the woman clearly knew my identity, yet seemed to lack disdain toward me. I would know for certain in a moment if that observation held true. As all humans in Elydor, I possessed some measure of intuitive abilities which, in me, manifested as an ability to sense emotion. Unlike Mev, however, I could not determine intention or use my ability unless the person was close to me. "Sir Rowan?" she asked, dismounting. As the guards watched, she approached. With every step, any doubt I had about her capabilities were eradicated. Though she'd only said 2 words to me, those were enough. It was not the first time I'd been in the presence of royalty, or of those close to it in some way, to know that she fit that particular mold. Yet hers was not of the haughty or entitled variety, but one of quiet confidence. I said, bowing to her. It was the Thalassari greeting appropriate for her station. If we were familiar, I would have embraced her. If she were a human, I'd have shaken her hand. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance," she said. "And I yours." She took that final step toward me that I needed to read her. Whether I willed it or not, a certainty filled every pore of my body. As it had been since I'd learned to control it, the sense of calm was accompanied by another feeling. This one as unpredictable as the person standing before me. Sincerity. If we were not being watched so closely by the guards, both those who had made themselves known and those behind us who had not, I might have been able to sense secondary emotions as well. But when my attention was divided, as it was now, I could sense just one emotion at a time. Shockingly, she was being sincere. A Thalassari genuinely pleased to meet me. A human. Interesting. "My name is Nerys," she said, her voice lilting and melodic. If sirens like the ones in my human tales existed, she would be one of them. Not because she wished to do me ill, but because I'd just lost all sense of my training, of the detachment necessary to make good judgments. I stared at her the same way I had the day my father had said, "Sit down, son, you have come of age, and we must discuss our family origins." Nerys. Her name suited her. Her clothing suited her. Her voice and assurance all suited her. "Have you been to the palace before?" "I have not," I said, "though I'm aware of its procedures." Most would not have noticed the slight widening of her eyes or twitch of her mouth that accompanied it, giving away her surprise. I not only noticed, but felt the shift that confirmed my suspicions. It was a mistake my grandfather would have chastised me for, one the keepers did not make. If you speak a word, consider carefully whether or not it might reveal more than you intended. We've not kept a centuries-old secret by being careless. It was the reason keepers befriended few, married other humans, and kept to themselves. At least, most operated in such a way. My desire for connections outside of other keepers was a weakness, no doubt. "So you are aware," she continued, thankfully not commenting on my retort, "that you will be provided an escort from this moment until the one you leave palace grounds?" "I am." "And that once inside, you will remain by my side or within your chambers at all times?" I could not resist a smile. "You are my escort, then?" Nerys's lack of reaction made me wonder at her own training. One did not become a Thalassarian guard without a great measure of skill. What was this woman's story? "I am," she said. "As such, I am required to ask of your purpose here before we continue." That was not information I could divulge. "To speak with the Queen." "Unfortunately, I require more information than that." "Unfortunately, I am not able to give it to you." I didn't say as much, however. "I've been sent to speak to your Queen on behalf of King Galfried, concerning the return of his daughter." It was information she would have already. By now, word of the return of the lost princess had spread throughout Elydor. "Would King Galfried not send an Aetherian for such a purpose?" "He would," I offered diplomatically. "Normally." She waited. I had nothing more to offer beyond what I'd told her. "I'm afraid—" "Princess Mevlida is a friend," I said, my words the only truth I could give her. "I have a unique perspective on her return, one your Queen will wish to learn of, especially as it may impact all Elydor." That got her attention. "We were told the princess was taken by Kael of Gioria and returned to her father." "She was," I confirmed. "I will be glad to share more of that tale with you, but I've been travelling for many days with some urgency at the behest of the Aetherian king. If we might make our way to the palace." I stopped at that, my implication clear. If Nerys wished to know more about a topic every person in Elydor was curious about, why and how Mev came through the gate, she would take me to the palace. "Very well," she said finally. "You'll be reunited with your belongings once inside, with the exception of your weapons. Those will be returned to you when you are no longer on palace grounds." As expected. I smiled, hoping to put her at ease, since Nerys, though undoubtedly powerful, could not read my own sincerity and had little cause to trust me. Thankfully, she turned away just as the emotion she was now feeling settled into my consciousness. It was not mistrust, as I'd expected on meeting her, or wariness, given how little I was able to share about my intentions in meeting the Queen. It was the one thing I couldn't guard against. Desire.
Chapter 4. Nerys. He rode as effortlessly as he smiled, this human with hazel eyes that spoke of riddles. Skin nearly as tanned as a Thalassarian, and brown hair, neither long nor short, marked him as a human who, unlike the other clans, had no one universally defining feature. His warrior's clothing could pass for Giorian. Most humans were more readily identifiable, but this one blended in well as an Elydorian. He was also exceedingly handsome. Even more so than the one I nearly partnered with so many years ago. Like my parents, he too had met an untimely death. I'd long ago released the notion I was somehow cursed, yet I knew no others who had lost so many dear to them. Immortality was the gift Elydor had bequeathed to all those who inhabited this realm from its celestial beginnings. Even so, our death was possible, and, if some were to be believed, more likely around me. The silver fish. Rowan, my human charge, pointed to the stream we rode beside. What are they? I don't recall them. You've been to Thalassaria before? I have, he said, offering no further explanation. Most humans who visited the palace were noblemen, but this one's title did not identify him as such. I was surprised the Queen granted him an audience with so little information about the nature of his visit. They are called Nera, and can only be found on palace grounds. It's a sacred species, tied to the history of the first king of Thalassaria. Which explains why I've never seen them before. Sir Rowan said it almost absently, as he peered alternately up toward coral-white posts, their lanterns casting a soft glow, and down into the streams and pools of water we navigated. This spot, I explained, was chosen for the palace grounds for its unique flora and fauna. There is no other like it in our kingdom. The first time I came here with my father, I was in awe of everything about Thalassaria. He finally looked at me. I almost wished he hadn't. It was easier to pretend he didn't affect me then, because I most certainly could not be affected, in that way, by a human. No less in awe, I am certain, than seeing Etheria for the first time? Perhaps, he said, but there is nothing quite like walking through soft sands. He gestured to his left. And these shallow turquoise lagoons. He slowed, so I did too. Bioluminescent corals? He asked, pointing. Now that the sun had begun to set, the colors were even more striking. I'd made this trek so many times since I'd begun to work at the palace that I sometimes didn't notice them. Yes. Nodding to the many bridges woven from shells and sea glass ahead of us as we began riding once again. Also bioluminescent. The shells absorb sunlight during the day. That bluish glow now at dusk is called the tide's gift. It lights the path for travelers, but is also a revered symbol of our clan's deep connection with nature. The harmony between Thalassaria and the ocean is life-giving to us, as I'm sure you are aware. We leave our mounts here. Smiling as we dismounted and walked into the stables, I watched the human's expression, one I'd seen many times before. Anticipating his questions, I said, "Each stall is an open alcove, as you see, formed from natural rock and coral. The seashell mosaics and flowing seaweed curtains have existed for hundreds of years." "I never expected the palace to have so many unique features," he said, as the stablemaster took both of our mounts. Patting Seaborn's flank, I thanked the young man and led Sir Rowan back outside. We walked toward yet another bridge, past cascading waterfalls that misted the air around us. "It is the best of Thalassaria, according to the Queen." I should not have added that last bit. Unfortunately, he noticed. Sir Rowan stopped in the middle of the bridge and stepped toward me. Though he likely did it to hear me more clearly, with the sound of waterfalls drowning out our words, my heart still skipped a little beat. "According to the Queen." I rarely slipped up so easily, but something about this man made my tongue wag more freely than it should. His easy manner and smiles, maybe. Trying to deflect the question, I asked one of him. "What is your role in Estmere, Sir Rowan? I find myself most curious about your purpose here." Simply Rowan, he said. I am the son of a nobleman who wishes for a place for humans in Elydor. Simply? I cocked my head to the side. Is there anything simple about you, Rowan? His brief lip bite was so quick, if I blinked, I would have missed it. I could say the same of you. Tell me, why are you not wary of me? Why should I be wary of you? I asked, pretending not to understand his question. But I did. I've never met a Thalassarian quite as welcoming to a human. Your answer is an honest one. And accurate, too. Those who raised me have a more measured view of humans than some of my clan. But, I was quick to add, they are not alone. More think as we do than you might believe. I could have said more, but thought better of it. The palace is the best of Thalassaria, according to the Queen. He returned to my earlier words. You do not agree with Queen Lirael on its merits. And if I were to be bold in saying so, other matters as well. This human was dangerous, in a different way than most. You have the sight. He shook his head. I do not. Crossing my arms, I gave Rowan a look that told him I didn't believe him, because I didn't. You could not know as much otherwise. His slow smile was meant to disarm me, and it worked. I did not know, but merely guessed. At least, not until you confirmed my suspicions. A nobleman's son. That might be true, but he was more than that, too. I was certain of it. What is your gift, then? I asked, not expecting him to answer. A human's gift was their greatest power. Asking of it was considered borderline rude, and few humans would offer a free response to such a question, especially to a stranger. If I tell you, will you share with me what you believe is the best of Thalassaria, if not for its palace? It's people, I said. The answer an easy one. They may be wary of outsiders and often too suspicious by nature, but that is only because Thalassarians value their independence. The palace is magnificent, but pales in comparison to the people who live within its borders. He was no less surprised by my response than I was to have so freely given it. I can sense emotion, he said. Had he really just told me his gift? Sensing emotion? That was not as common among humans, but I froze. That meant no. No, no, no. The tug on Rowan's lips told me he knew exactly what I'd been thinking, what emotion I would have liked to conceal from him but couldn't, even now that I knew of his gift. Not to worry, he said, Rowan's voice as smooth as the tide gliding over polished stone. If you could read emotion too, you'd have sensed the same in me since being in your presence. Shall we continue? Trying not to react, I stepped forward, putting one foot in front of the other as the implications of his words tumbled around in my brain. So, he was attracted to me, too.
Chapter 5. Rowan. I sat on the same sort of bed, its insides as fluid as I remembered from my previous visit, though this one was much bigger. Waiting for the knock that would signal Nerys's return, I took in my surroundings. Sheer, translucent curtains cascaded from the bed canopy, mimicking the gentle flow of water. A large, arched window opposite me offered a view of the sea, according to Nerys, though now it opened only to darkness. Sconces fashioned from shells cast a warm glow throughout the chamber, but the most striking feature was the adjoining antechamber that I had just left. Warm water cascaded continually from the high ceiling above, an entire room dedicated to cleansing, one like I'd never seen before. Water magic, I assumed, made such a thing possible. Even now I could hear its echo, a soothing sound that seemed, unsurprisingly, to be found everywhere at the palace. And then there was Nerys. I stood and made my way to the window. Lights of every colour, but especially greens and blues, were sprinkled across the grounds. Bioluminescent algae could be found throughout Elydor, but this was something entirely different. Seemingly everything was imbued with the gleaming lights that could not be seen during the day, but lit up spectacularly in the darkness. I could stare out this window all evening. I could stare at Nerys my whole life. Her beauty was as striking as the mysteries of the sea. Nerys's sun-kissed skin and aquamarine eyes lent her an innocence at odds with the rest of her. No mention of parents, but those who raised her. Her strength and resilience were evident in the way she walked, rode, held her head. Smiling as I remembered her expression when I told Nerys of my gift, a revelation that had come easily from my lips, though I did not regret it, I turned toward the door, as if anticipating her knock, which came a moment later. Though Nerys had attempted to put me at ease about the fact that my bedchamber would be locked at all times, I still found it disconcerting. Not that I was alone with such unease. Every human visitor to the Thalassarian palace complained of the same. Opening my door, I sensed anticipation before I could block her emotion. Nothing could have prepared me for the sight of her. Waves of hair fell down her shoulders and back, the smallest of iridescent seashells dispersed throughout. Her dinner gown was strapless, the bodice turquoise and broken up with swathes of cream. Shells adorned the front, distinguishable up close. From far away they would look like small gemstones. The best part of Thalassaria might be its people, according to Nerys, and the palace, according to the Queen. But from my viewpoint, it was the woman standing before me. "You are magnificent." The words spilled out before I could stop them, my thoughts more addled than they had been in a long time. "Apologies," I began, but Nerys interrupted me. "None are necessary. Thank you," she said, accepting the compliment with grace. "We've likely missed the first course." "How many are typically served?" I asked as we made our way through open corridors. "Too many." At her tone, and before I could reconsider it, a consideration flew from my lips. In Estmere, it is not seen as untoward for a guest to be served privately by their host, as a way to ease them into their environment. Nerys stopped. For a moment I thought she might chastise my forwardness, so I rushed to add, "I mean nothing untoward by such a suggestion." "Come," she said in response. "This way." We walked silently through corridors of polished stone in shades of pearl and sea green, ornate archways decorated with carvings of mythical sea creatures all along the way. Tall windows graced one side of the corridor, allowing moonlight to fill the space. It feels as though we are beneath the surface of the sea. A couple, both dressed as formally as Nerys, moved past us. My guide inclined her head in greeting as both the man and woman looked at me as if I did not belong here, which, of course, I didn't. Even when you do not see water, it's there. There are hidden fountains and trickling aqueducts behind each wall. "Take a deep breath," Nerys said, her gown shimmering with each step. "It smells like minerals and fresh water." The very palace itself is alive and breathing in rhythm with the sea. If you feel as if you are inside it, that is intentional. Just as if you feel you are among the clouds in Aethralis. She stopped in front of a door. Opening it, Nerys stepped inside. It was a near replica of my own chamber, though larger, with a table in the corner just beside a window that was nearly as large as the wall. "We have a similar custom," she said, gesturing to one of the seats at the pearl stone table. "Though I thought perhaps you wished to dine in the same hall as the Queen." "I look forward to my audiences with her," I said, sitting, "but would much prefer this." Nerys had made her way toward a wall. With a wave of her hand, what appeared to be a mirror suddenly rippled. I looked more closely. How was such a thing possible? The mirror had turned into water. "My lady?" A faint male voice asked. "May I have wine and a meal for two, please?" "Of course." As quickly as it appeared, the water was gone. I had to see for myself. Joining her, I studied the mirror that reflected back both of us. What was that? "You've not seen mirror scrying before, then?" Mirror scrying. I'd heard of it, of course. I thought that skill was merely a legend. I can assure you it is very real. And you are a stormcaller as well, I guessed. I am. Only the most powerful Thalassarians could become stormcallers, many of whom worked at and for the palace. Of those, I guessed very few had the skill which was so difficult, not even the keepers had seen it performed. I'd have asked another question, but a knock on her door was followed by two servants who hardly looked my way. Putting trays of food and wine on the table, they left without so much as a cursory glance. "They are trained to be discreet," Nerys said, answering my silent question. "You must be hungry." I was more curious than hungry, but when we sat, my stomach disagreed. From salad to fresh fish, both platters were filled to the brim, reminding me that I hadn't had a proper meal in days. Nerys poured us each the sapphire-coloured wine Thalassaria was known for, though its sweetness, followed by a smoky aftertaste, took getting accustomed to. "You are extremely powerful," I said between bites. "One of the women who trained me is descended from a line of highly skilled water-wielders." "Will you tell me of her?" Nerys lowered her wine, the pewter's intricate